Chosen one. This message does not begin where stories usually begin, because truth rarely announces itself with ceremony. Instead, it unfolds the way awareness unfolds quietly, gradually, and without asking permission. And so, this divine message moves forward without pause, without interruption, and without space, because the divine itself does not stop to explain it. Simply flows, and in this uninterrupted flow you are invited not to read, but to remember, not to agree, but to recognize, not to follow. But to awaken, you have spent much of your life being told who you are, what you should become, what success looks like, what failure means, and where the divine is supposed to live. Yet beneath all of those instructions there has always been a deeper knowing that was never taught, because it could not be taught. It could only be realized. This message speaks to that knowing, the part of you that has watched thoughts arise and fall, the part of you that has felt peace without reason and fear without, because the part of you that has sensed meaning even in moments of confusion. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were conditioned to forget your wholeness. And this forgetting created a search, and the search created exhaustion, and exhaustion created doubt, and doubt created suffering. And suffering was mistaken for destiny, but destiny was never meant to be heavy. Destiny was meant to be clear. The divine does not demand sacrifice to grant favor. The divine does not trade blessings for obedience. The divine does not withhold love to test loyalty. Those ideas were created by fearful minds attempting to control uncertain hearts. The truth is simpler and far more radical. The divine expresses itself as you through your awareness, through your capacity to choose, through your ability to witness your own experience without becoming lost in it every moment. You notice your breath without controlling it. Every moment you observe a thought without believing it. Every moment you act from clarity instead of reaction. You are aligned with the divine, not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. This message continues not to persuade, but to dissolve illusions one by one. Illusion says you must become worthy. Truth says worthiness is your nature. Illusion says you are separate. Truth says separation is a misunderstanding. Illusion says you must struggle to survive. Truth says life supports what aligns with it. Illusion says the future holds meaning. Truth says meaning is only ever. Found now, you have been taught to postpone joy, to delay peace, and to condition happiness on outcomes that are never guaranteed. Yet peace was never meant to be a reward. It was meant to be a foundation from which you act when you act from peace. Clarity replaces confusion. Effort replaces force, and intention replaces fear. This is not philosophy, this is observation. Look at moments when you acted from panic and notice the contraction, the resistance, the unintended consequences. Now look at moments when you acted from calm awareness and notice the efficiency, the alignment, the quiet confidence. The divine does not shout, because shouting belongs to fear. The divine does not rush, because urgency belongs to lack. The divine does not threaten, because control belongs to insecurity. The divine invites, because invitation honors free will, and free will is the signature of consciousness. You are not here to escape the world. You are here to see it clearly. You are not here to reject desire. You are here to understand it. You are not here to destroy the ego. You are here to see through it. Ego is not an enemy. It is a tool misunderstood. It becomes a prison. Understood, it becomes a servant. The problem was never identity. The problem was attachment. You were never meant to erase your personality. You were meant to stop confusing it with your essence. This message continues flowing because awareness does not pause between breaths. Life does not insert line breaks between moments, and the divine does not compartmentalize wisdom into chapters. Everything is always happening at once, and yet can only be experienced now. Now is where fear dissolves. Now is where clarity arises. Now is where choice becomes possible. You cannot change the past because the past no longer exists. You cannot control the future because the future has not arrived. But you can meet this moment with honesty, and that honesty reshapes everything. This is not motivation, this is mechanics. Consciousness works a certain way, and suffering is simply the signal that something is being resisted when you stop resisting. What is, you gain the freedom to respond creatively. What you resist persists because attention feeds experience. What you allow transforms because acceptance removes conflict, and where there is no conflict, energy becomes available for insight, compassion, and intelligent action. The divine is not interested in your perfection. It is interested in your presence. Perfection is a concept. Presence is a reality. Concepts divide, reality unites when you are present. You are whole. When you're whole, you act wisely. When you act wisely, life reflects coherence. This is not belief. It is alignment, and alignment does not require effort. It requires honesty the most. Difficult truths are not complex. They are simple, and simplicity threatens identities built on struggle. If you have suffered long enough, suffering begins to feel meaningful. Letting it go can feel like betrayal, but releasing suffering does not. Invalidate your past. It liberates your future. You are not required to carry pain to prove strength. You are not required to repeat cycles to honor history. You are not required to stay small to make others comfortable. The divine does not reward self. Abandonment. It supports self-realization. This message flows onward to remind you that fear is not an enemy. It is a messenger. Fear appears when the mind projects itself into an imagined future and mistakes that projection for reality. The body responds as if the threat were present and tension arises. Awareness breaks this loop by recognizing projection as projection, thought as thought, sensation as sensation. When you see clearly, the spell dissolves. This is not suppression, this is understanding, and understanding is always freeing. The divine does not remove challenges, because challenges are how intelligence expresses itself in form. What dissolves is unnecessary suffering, resistance, confusion, and self-betrayal. When clarity enters action, becomes precise, and effort becomes meaningful, you begin to see that patience is not waiting but trusting, timing is not control but cooperation, discipline is not punishment but devotion, devotion not to an external authority but to truth itself. You begin to feel guided, not because someone is directing you, but because you are no longer ignoring your own awareness. Intuition sharpens not as mysticism, but as sensitivity to reality. You notice subtleties, patterns, feedback. Life speaks, constantly, but most are too busy narrating to listen. This message is not here to replace your thinking. It is here to create space around it in that space. Wisdom emerges naturally. You do not need to force insight. Insight arises when the mind relaxes its grip on certainty. Certainty is often a defense against uncertainty, but uncertainty is not a flaw. It is the open field in which creativity exists. The divine is not certain, it is infinite, and infinity cannot be predicted, only experienced. When you stop demanding guarantees, you start noticing guidance when you stop seeking approval. You start recognizing alignment when you stop asking who you should be. You start remembering who you are, and who you are is not a label, not a role, not a story, but awareness expressing itself uniquely through a human life. This uniqueness is not meant to separate you from others, but to enrich the whole, just as every instrument contributes to a symphony without competing for dominance. Harmony arises not from sameness, but from coherence. This message continues to flow, reminding you that comparison is the thief of clarity. The moment you measure yourself against another, you leave your own path and step into confusion. There is no hierarchy in consciousness. There are only expressions, some loud, some quiet, some brief, some enduring, but all equally real. The divine does not rank souls. It experiences itself through them. When you honor your own expression without inflating it or diminishing it, you naturally respect others without needing to agree with them. Disagreement does not require hostility. Difference does not require distance. The divine holds opposites without conflict because it sees the whole mind divides to understand, but awareness unites to. Live when you identify only with the dividing function, you suffer. When you rest as awareness, you navigate division without being consumed by it. This is the art of living fully engaged, yet inwardly free. You do not withdraw from life, you meet it openly. You do not numb emotions, you feel them completely without becoming them. Emotions are waves. Awareness is the ocean. Waves rise, waves fall. The ocean remains. This is not poetry, it is observation. Watch carefully and you will see it for yourself. And seeing for yourself is the only authority that matters. This message does not ask you to believe it, asks you to verify it. In your own experience, belief without verification is fragile. Verification without belief is powerful. You do not need faith. In truth, truth reveals itself when conditions allow. Those conditions are honesty, curiosity, and willingness to let go of what no longer fits. Letting go is not loss, it is accuracy. You release what is false, so what is real can function unobstructedly. Divine is pragmatic, not sentimental. It supports what works and dissolves what does not. When something collapses, it is not a punishment. It is feedback. When a relationship ends, a role dissolves, a belief shatters. It is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of evolution. Resisting change creates suffering. Cooperating with change creates growth. The divine does not preserve comfort. Without denial, without unnecessary drama, clarity is quiet, but decisive compassion is gentle. But firm love is open but boundaried. The divine does not ask you to tolerate harm to prove virtue. It asks you to see clearly and act wisely. Sometimes wisdom says stay, sometimes wisdom says leave, sometimes wisdom says speak, sometimes wisdom says be silent. Context determines truth, not ideology. The moment ideology replaces awareness, rigidity replaces intelligence, and rigidity eventually breaks life. Cannot be reduced to formulas, it must be lived attentively. This message continues uninterrupted because life does not pause for explanations. It invites participation moment by moment, breath by breath, choice by choice. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not failing. You are learning in real time, and learning is the process of life itself. There is no final arrival, only deeper participation. The divine is not a destination. It is the depth of engagement with what is. When you stop waiting for life to begin, it begins when you stop postponing peace. It reveals itself when you stop outsourcing authority. It returns home to awareness where it always lived. This message does not end because truth does not conclude. It keeps unfolding as long as attention remains open, and so this uninterrupted flow continues not to overwhelm, but to mirror the continuous nature of being. You can step out at any moment, not by stopping the words, but by noticing the silence in which they appear. And that silence is not empty, it is alive, it is aware, it is what you are. Somewhere while everything was already moving, while time was already unfolding, and while you were already breathing without instruction, this message takes shape. Not as guidance, not as teaching, and not as repetition of any earlier voice, but as a fresh current forming its own direction. It does not echo what was written before. It does not mirror familiar spiritual language, and it avoids recycled expressions, because truth does not depend on habit. It renews itself through perception. This flow begins midstream intentionally because understanding never arrives at the beginning. It arrives when readiness meets attention. You have crossed countless moments without noticing how awareness quietly adapted, adjusted, recalibrated, and learned without announcement. Your life has been an education delivered through experience rather than explanation. And this message respects that by speaking in movement rather than structure, you are not being corrected, you are being oriented, you are not being elevated. You are being aligned. Alignment is not improvement, it is accuracy. Accuracy with what is actually happening beneath the surface of your thoughts, beneath emotional narratives, beneath inherited interpretations. Most human effort is spent attempting to fix imagined problems while ignoring actual signals. Clarity arises when signals are heard without distortion. Distortion comes from expectation. Expectation demands reality. Confirm belief. And when reality refuses, tension appears. This tension has been normalized and renamed struggle. But struggle is optional once perception becomes honest. Honesty here does not mean moral virtue. It means precision, seeing what is, as it is, without decoration, without judgment, without resistance. This kind of seeing is rare because it threatens identities built on reaction and memory. But identity is not required for presence. Presence functions without labels and operates efficiently because it is responsive rather than defensive. The divine is not symbolic, it is operational. It functions as order within complexity, coherence within change, and responsiveness within uncertainty. And you participate in this function every time you meet experience directly, rather than through conclusion. Most conclusions are attempts to stop movement, but life does not stop, it only changes form. Awareness that tries to freeze experience becomes anxious. Awareness that flows with it becomes intelligent. This intelligence is not stored knowledge, it is situational clarity. The ability to sense what is appropriate now. Not what worked before. Now is always different, even when it appears familiar. Similarity is superficial. Nuance is decisive. Those who suffer repeatedly often miss nuance repeating. Responses that no longer fit the moment. Adaptability is not betrayal of principle. It is fidelity to reality. This message continues uninterrupted because interruption creates illusion of separation. Separation between sacred and ordinary, between inner and outer, between thought and action. But experience is seamless. Breath moves, thought arises, sensation follows response, emerges all within one field. Dividing this field creates confusion. Integrating it restores simplicity. Simplicity is not reduction. It is coherence. Many mistake simplicity for lack depth, but simplicity is depth without clutter. This is why clarity often feels quiet. It does not compete for attention. It stabilizes it. The divine does not persuade because persuasion belongs to uncertainty. It reveals, and revelation does not argue. It is recognized when readiness exists. Readiness cannot be forced. It matures through friction, through consequence, through reflection. You have already developed more awareness than you realize, because awareness grows through use, and you have been using it constantly. Even when unaware of doing so, every adjustment, every reconsideration, every pause before reaction, refined perception. Slightly, this refinement accumulates invisibly until one moment it becomes obvious, and that moment is often mislabeled awakening, but it is simply continuity becoming conscious. This message flows from that recognition, not claiming authority, not offering promises, not assigning destiny. It describes mechanics, not meanings, mechanics of attention, mechanics of response, mechanics of coherence when attention is fragmented. Experience feels overwhelming. When attention is unified, experience becomes navigable. Fragmentation comes from internal contradiction, wanting incompatible outcomes, believing conflicting ideas, pursuing approval while seeking authenticity. These contradictions drain energy. Awareness resolves them not by choosing sides, but by revealing incompatibility. Once seen, choice becomes clear, not because options disappear, but because alignment becomes obvious. This obviousness feels like relief. Relief is the body recognizing coherence. Tension releases without effort when mental conflict ends. The nervous system recalibrates naturally. This is why understanding heals without techniques compensate for lack of understanding. Understanding removes the need for compensation. The divine does not require performance. It responds to alignment. Performance is effort. Alignment is relationship. You do not perform gravity. You relate to it accordingly. You do not worship gravity. You respect its operation. Similarly, the divine operates whether acknowledged or not, but acknowledgement refines interaction. Life becomes less resistant. When understood, this message avoids familiar metaphors because metaphors can become cages once repeated. They replace direct seeing with remembered imagery. Here, language is used sparingly, not to decorate, but to pointing, without insisting each. Sentence exists to dissolve assumption, not to build belief. Belief solidifies perception. Perception must remain fluid to stay accurate. Fluidity does not mean instability, it means responsiveness. Water adapts to container without losing essence. Awareness adapts to circumstance without losing clarity. Those who cling to fixed views suffer when reality changes. Those who remain responsive evolve with it. Evolution is not improvement over others. It is relevance to the present moment. Relevance is the measure of intelligence, not accumulation of knowledge. Knowledge without relevance becomes burden. Wisdom is knowledge applied accurately now, and now is the only moment available. This message continues midstream because now has no edge. It is always already happening. The habit of waiting for readiness postpones engagement. Engagement creates readiness, not the other way around. You do not prepare to live by waiting. You prepare by living attentively. Attentiveness is the practice that requires no method, only sincerity. Sincerity means willingness to see without defense, without justification, without narrative overlay when sincerity is present. Insight emerges spontaneously, not as thought, but as shift in perception. Shifts reorganize. Behavior effortlessly. Behavior aligned with perception does not require discipline. Discipline compensates for misalignment. Alignment removes friction. This is why some actions feel heavy and others feel natural. Heaviness indicates resistance. Somewhere between intention and execution, naturalness indicates coherence between them. The divine communicates through this feedback constantly, but most ignore it. Chasing external validation instead of internal consistency. Validation never stabilizes because it depends on changing opinions. Consistency stabilizes because it depends on alignment with reality. This alignment does not isolate you from others. It enhances connection. Because clear perception reduces projection. Projection is the cause of misunderstanding. Misunderstanding fuels conflict. When perception clears, relationships simplify, not because agreement increases, but because interpretation decreases. You see others more as they are, rather than as symbols of your own unresolved patterns. This reduces emotional charge and increases practical cooperation. Compassion becomes functional, not sentimental. It guides effective response rather than passive tolerance. Boundaries become clear without hostility. Firmness emerges without aggression because clarity has no need to defend itself. This message flows onward because awareness does not reach finality. It refines endlessly. There is no permanent state. To achieve only continuous adjustment to what is actual. Striving for permanence creates anxiety. Allowing impermanence creates stability.